Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The ADHD Effect on Marriage. Understand and Rebuild Your Relationship in 6 Steps by Melissa Orlov. Narrated by Laura Jennings. Forward. I will never forget meeting Melissa Orlov for the first time. She was a trustee at Phillips Exeter Academy, a prep school in New Hampshire that both of us had attended. She was doing some research at the school, and she thought I might be helpful to her. Since one of the truest loves in my life is for that school, I gladly agreed. We met at a seafood restaurant in Cambridge called Summer Shack. Melissa arrived first. When I arrived and scanned the room, the only person I saw was someone I took to be a man because the person's hair was cut so short. This turned out to be Melissa. Her hair is much, much longer now. She has changed in many more ways than that, as has her husband George. When I first met him, he was a short, wiry, strong-willed man who held the typical male position that he pretty much had things figured out. On the other hand, he was curious enough to learn new stuff. For example, he was willing to learn about his own ADHD. He is still a short, wiry, strong-willed man, but he has learned a lot. Melissa and George have become, in my eyes at least, heroes. They are heroes because they faced down dragons, fire-breathing dragons, as dangerous as any Sir Gawain ever fought, and they did so with courage, grace, and honesty. They yanked their marriage from the jaws of defeat and have placed it now in a secure and joyful spot. Having been a psychiatrist for more than 3 decades, I have learned what usually happens when marriages go as wrong as George's and Melissa's had gone. Usually, harsh words follow harsh deeds. Betrayal surface. Old wounds get ripped open. Attack supplants understanding. Friends take sides. The members of the couple busily justify their respective positions. Blame is affixed and all but notarized. Feelings sour. Fond memories fade. Children suffer. Relatives fret. The lives of many people warp. And what once was love becomes a rancid concoction. But Melissa and George said no to this usual way. They created a different way for themselves and their marriage. They looked at each other and asked, "Why not choose love?" And then they set about the painstaking, arduous task of rebuilding a relationship that many had written off as a lost cause. Piece by piece, behind closed doors, they put back together an edifice that had fallen apart. Piece by piece, they put back together hearts that each had broken. Piece by piece, they reassembled what each had smashed to smithereens. Day after day, week after week, month after month, they did the seemingly impossible work of forgiving, understanding, connecting, and reigniting true and honest love. One reason they are heroes in my book is that they totally defied the odds and gave me a precedent I can cite when cynics tell me that it can't be done. Many people in the field of mental health become quite cynical by the time they reach my age, which is 60, and they utter wary, weary cautions against getting one's hopes up. But Melissa and George proved that lost love can turn into a love even better than the love that was lost. This is an heroic achievement, worthy of celebration, don't you agree? To me, this book is that celebration, and true to form, they turned their celebration into a gift for others. Over the past 5 years, Melissa has been an ardent student of how ADHD influences relationships. She has studied and studied, listened and listened, and learned. I dare say she is one of the foremost authorities on ADHD and relationships in the world today. Every day, from blogging to speaking to people on the phone, she offers advice based on not only her first-hand experience, but also the immense knowledge she has gained through study. She and George have had the courage to tell the world about what went wrong for them. But this book is far from a confession. It is a shrewd and smart compendium of strategies, tricks, ploys, and gambits. It is a brilliant compilation of what you can do if you are in a marriage in which one or both of you has ADHD. It is a lifesaver of a book. It is the best kind of book, a book that can change lives for the better, and dramatically so. Because she does not have a degree in medicine or mental health, Melissa at times wondered whether she is qualified to write this book. From her humility emerged her tenacious dedication to the task of learning everything she possibly could that might help others. As I've stated, she now is far more expert than most experts. But she also has what few experts have. She has the benefit of her own suffering. She has the benefit of having weathered the worst kind of storm. She has the benefit of having lived what she's talking about. And she has the benefit of having prevailed. You can trust this woman, this couple, and this book. You can learn from what's here. You can grow using what's here. And, as Melissa and George did, you can recreate love. Edward M. Hallowell, M.D. A few notes about this book. Technically, Attention Deficit Disorder, also known by the acronym ADD, no longer exists. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, known by the acronym ADHD, is currently the official medical name for attention deficit disorder, with subtypes. Essentially, one with hyperactivity, one with distraction as the predominant feature, and one with both. The Psychiatric Diagnostic Manual is currently being updated. Part of the conversation for the next version includes whether to return to recognizing an ADHD with hyperactivity and an ADD without. In addition, there is discussion about separating adult ADHD from childhood ADHD. Whether an ADHD spouse is hyperactive does not matter for the purposes of this book. While I will focus on common patterns in this book, ADHD does present itself differently in different people. So a statement made about people with ADHD or non-ADHD spouses is a generalization, and it should be remembered that any individual may or may not exhibit that specific characteristic. You will find that while I try to mix up the genders of the spouse with ADHD throughout the book, both men and women have it after all. Many examples use the masculine for the ADHD partners. This does not reflect a bias on my part. Rather, it seems that more women than men seem to be searching the internet for relationship information and landing at my blog and forum, from which most of the examples in this book originate. The information in this book applies not just to couples in which one spouse has ADHD, but also to couples in which both partners have ADHD. In dual ADHD households, it is often the case that one partner is better at controlling ADHD symptoms. Sometimes that partner resents the less organized spouse, thinking, if I can make the effort to control ADHD, why can't my partner? And some of the patterns described in this book develop. But dual ADHD couples can also find that their intimate knowledge of ADHD helps them appreciate each other more, even if things get chaotic. Section 1. Understanding ADHD in your marriage. The ADHD effect. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. Marriages affected by ADHD, an acronym for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, like all marriages, range from highly successful to completely disastrous. It is safe to say, though, that those distorted by ADHD symptoms sit squarely in the worst of times. Pain and anger abound. During the worst times, you can barely talk to each other. When you do, you rarely agree or see things the same way. You're frustrated that you've gotten to this point, and you're incredulous that you haven't been able to make things better. Both of you have begun to suspect that your spouse doesn't really want to improve things. If he or she did, wouldn't things have gotten better by now? If you are married to a person who has or might have ADHD, you might feel ignored and lonely in your relationship. Your spouse never seems to follow up on what he agrees to do, so much so that you may feel as if you really have another child in your home instead of an adult. You feel you're forced to remind him all the time to do things. You nag, and you've started to dislike the person you've become. The two of you either fight often or have virtually nothing to say to each other that either of you finds meaningful. You are frustrated that your spouse seems to be able to focus intently on things that interest him, but never on you. Perhaps, worst of all, you feel intense stress from not knowing whether you can rely on him and feeling saddled with almost all of the responsibilities of the household, while your spouse gets to have all the fun. If you have ADHD, or think you do, you may feel as if the person you married is buried deep within a nagging monster that lives in your home. The person you had cherished has been transformed into a control freak, trying to manage every single detail of your life together. No matter how hard you try, you can never do well enough for your spouse, even if you are successful elsewhere, such as in your work. The easiest way to deal with her is simply to leave her alone. You're willing to admit that you make mistakes sometimes, but so does she, and certainly, no one is perfect. You wish she would just relax once in a while and live life as a happy person, instead of a harpy. If either of these descriptions sounds familiar, you are suffering from what I call the ADHD effect. Your courtship was happy and exciting and often fast, but your marriage has been completely different. You may feel desperately unhappy and lonely, and your partner isn't even aware of it, even if you've tried to talk about it. You fight and nag much more than you expected, and life often seems depressingly up and down and out of control. The underlying reason could be that ADHD symptoms and the responses both of you have to those symptoms have been destroying your partnership. The good news is that understanding the role that ADHD plays can turn your marriage around. In The ADHD Effect on Marriage, you will learn how to identify ADHD and the issues it brings to marriages, as well as specific steps you can take to begin to rebuild your lives. You will be surprised by the consistency and predictability of the patterns in marriages affected by ADHD. These patterns start with an ADHD symptom that triggers a series of predictable responses in both spouses, creating a downward spiral in your marriage. In this case, knowledge is power. You both contribute to these patterns. If you know what they are, you can also change them or avoid them altogether. This book is the guide my husband and I wish we had from the beginning. It will take you through the steps needed to regain your footing in your relationship, repair the emotional damage, and create a path into a brighter and more satisfying future. You'll find out that your problems aren't because of character flaws or failings, but are the result of the ADHD effect, and that the two of you together can overcome it. You'll learn how to put ADHD back where it belongs, as just one of many aspects of your lives, not as the overwhelming determinant of your days. The stakes are high. The research on divorce and ADHD. The stakes are high. Research on how ADHD affects marriage suggests that many of these marriages founder under the misunderstandings and issues that ADHD symptoms add to the relationship. It is quite possible that you are currently considering divorce, or have done so at some point in your marriage. If so, you would not be alone. According to one study, a person who has ADHD is almost twice as likely as one who does not have ADHD to be divorced. A different study suggests that 58% of relationships with at least one person with ADHD are clinically dysfunctional, twice that of the non-ADHD population. The first notable study on divorce and separation rates for adults with ADHD was done by Biederman and others in 1993 and was replicated by Murphy and Barkley in 1996. Both of these studies used older participants than later studies done by Barkley and others, which showed less elevated divorce rates, but very elevated dysfunction rates, that of 58% of marriages. Given that marital dissatisfaction builds over time with the repetitive introduction of ADHD symptoms into relationships, I find that these studies are consistent with what I observe, that things can be bad right away, with dysfunctional patterns between spouses building, eventually leading to divorce if not addressed. For more details about all these studies, see ADHD in Adults, What the Science Says, by Russell A. Barkley, Kevin R. Murphy, and Mary Ellen Fisher. These frightening statistics reinforce just how difficult many of these relationships become. However, these statistics do not mean that people with ADHD can't make good spouses. In these marriages, both partners fall victim to a combination of ADHD symptoms and their mutual responses, and lack of responses, to those symptoms. I see evidence of this every day. Thousands of couples have shared their ADHD marital stories at ADHDmarriage.com, the blog and forum I have run with Dr. Edward Hallowell since 2007. These challenges these couples face are significant, as well as often shockingly familiar. They share their deepest feelings, experiences, and dreams. Untreated, or incompletely treated, ADHD can be really hard to live with for both partners. Symptoms create real physical, financial, and mental hardship. But there is something else going on too. What I have observed at the blog, as well as in my consulting practice with couples, is that a great deal of damage is caused by lack of knowledge about and misinterpretation of ADHD symptoms. Couples who learn about the specific patterns that emerge in these relationships can learn how to avoid them. That's why this book addresses all of the following. 1. Identifying and interpreting ADHD symptoms in adults. 2. Why treating ADHD effectively is critical, and what effective treatment looks like within a relationship. And 3. Finding ways to interact that are positive for both of you while taking the presence of ADHD into account. The rewards of rebuilding your ADHD-affected marriage. A brief overview of my own story will demonstrate that even the most dysfunctional marriages can improve and thrive with the right knowledge, understanding, compassion, emotional strength, and a determination to move past marital history. Like many couples, my husband and I had no idea that one of us had ADHD. I had fallen in love with my husband's brilliance, sharp wit, and penchant for adventure. He is a lover of music, food, and wine, and he breathed unexpected excitement into my life with love, attention, gifts, and surprise trips. He focused on me with a ferocity that both surprised and flattered me. He was accomplished and professionally successful, yet warm. When I got sick on our first date, I was touched that he tucked me under a blanket on the sofa and made me hot tea. But in its early years, our marriage began to fall apart, despite the fact that we loved each other. I couldn't understand how someone who had started out so attentive could now ignore me and my needs so completely, or be so consistently inconsistent when it came to carrying his weight around the house and with the children. He sometimes helped out, but usually didn't, and often seemed to be unaware of my existence. As it turned out, He was equally confused and annoyed. How could the woman he had married, who had seemed so warm and optimistic, change into an exhausted nag who wouldn't give him a break and wouldn't leave him alone? By our 10-year anniversary, we were completely dysfunctional as a couple and contemplating divorce. We were held together only by our desire to raise our children well and a feeling deep inside that we ought to be able to do better. We were angry, frustrated, completely disconnected, and deeply unhappy. I was clinically depressed. Around that time, our daughter, at age 9, was diagnosed with both a math learning disability and ADHD. We did not know that ADHD is extremely heritable, comparable in its heritability to height. About half of children whose parents have ADHD also have ADHD. Research done by Biederman and others in 1995 put the chances of an adult with diagnosed ADHD having a child with ADHD at 57%, while in 2003, Mind and others placed it lower at 43%. For more detail about these studies and the heritability of ADHD, as well as the heritability of coexisting conditions, see ADHD in Adults, What the Science Says. If you have a child with ADHD, chances are good that one of the biological parents has ADHD. Eventually, we learned of this connection and confirmed through a full evaluation that my husband has ADHD. This started a battle over whether he should treat it and how he and I should respond. This kind of battle is typical. For some people, the diagnosis is a relief and a new beginning. For others, like my husband, it seems a threat to their status, self-knowledge, and self-image. How much should one change? For whom is one changing? Over time, and with the right kinds of support, most with ADHD can accept the implications of their diagnosis and make their lives and the lives of their partners better. Discovering that one or both of you has ADHD is just the beginning. Medication is the most efficient way to jumpstart treatment, but it does not effectively treat ADHD in marriages without the addition of behavioral changes. These changes must be voluntary. No matter how much a non-ADHD spouse may want to, she can't make her spouse do certain things, like be more organized or more attentive. Furthermore, these changes must come from both partners. Changes only in the ADHD spouse don't resolve the marriage's issues. We learned both ideas the hard way, mostly at my husband's expense, as I kept trying to force him to do things differently. The harder I pushed, the more he resisted, and the worse our relationship became. Sound familiar? I am asking you to come on a journey of change, not offering a quick fix. If I did offer that, would you believe that I can deliver it? The rewards of the journey are worth it. My husband and I have moved from completely dysfunctional to almost ridiculously happy. We are thriving as individuals and feel that our relationship is stronger now than it has ever been. Back in love, we feel safer and more optimistic than on the day we married over 20 years ago. My husband's ADHD symptoms are under control, and I have a much stronger understanding and appreciation of the effort that takes. Unlike during our difficult times, we know and accept each other's faults and rejoice in each other's strengths. Our pride in our ability to pull ourselves back from the brink helps us to celebrate our feelings in ways that are loving and supportive. We won't ever go back to our difficult past, and have crafted a new relationship and brilliant future. You can do this too. You can move past your current unhappiness and create something better than you could have ever dreamed possible. ADHD and its diagnosis. I've seen too many people with ADD prevail over their problems to ever believe it's impossible. Everyone who has ADD can sculpt a fulfilling, joyful life out of what they've been born with. Doing so starts in your head and in your heart. You need knowledge and you need hope. Dr. Edward Hallowell. At the extremes of opinion, ADHD is either a terrible disorder that can ruin your life or a way of being in the world that is misunderstood by many and can be considered a gift when properly treated. Both views are supported by the same research. They simply represent different approaches to thinking about and treating ADHD. The curse camp points to the statistics. Historically, people with ADHD have fared worse than those without ADHD in many life functions: holding jobs, staying happily married, staying out of jail. This is proof that ADHD is a problem that needs to be treated as a dysfunction or an illness, much in the same way one would treat a physical illness or a disease. The gift camp believes that people with ADHD have many wonderful attributes that can be obscured by their symptoms. This group believes in the power of human inspiration and willpower to change one's circumstances. They know that it takes a lot of hard work to change the habits developed in response to ADHD symptoms so that one can thrive in the world. Change, they say, can best come from hope and inspiration. After years of dealing with both child and adult ADHD in my own family, as well as advising couples struggling with ADHD, I take a modified positive approach. Being realistic about the great stress ADHD can place on both spouses is critical to dealing with ADHD in your relationship. Yet optimism is also critically important. I have seen firsthand the benefits that being positive can provide. My daughter, a smart, creative, lovely woman of 19 at the time of this writing, has her share of challenges created by her ADHD symptoms. Yet I heard her tell another teen a few summers ago, "I wouldn't want to be without ADHD. It's the reason I am who I am, creative, able to think differently, able to see the world in fresh ways." She recognizes that every individual is unique, and she attributes much of her specialness, for better or for worse, to her ADHD way of being. When the harder aspects of ADHD symptoms are accepted as the flip side of the very positive aspects of ADHD, a balance can be achieved that is similar to the balance that people without ADHD create for themselves. I, for example, do not have ADHD, but I do have specific weaknesses that I acknowledge and work around in my everyday life. I generally have not needed medication to help me achieve that balance, though I found that the experience of treating depression with medication for several years, and the dramatic improvement in my outlook that this medication provided, helped me to gain greater respect for the benefits and limits of psychotropic medications. My daughter, with the help of ADHD medications in low doses, has found her own balance point. Like me, she has strengths she pursues with passion, and weaknesses she must accommodate. But I am confident that if her father and I had treated her as if she had a terrible disorder, she would have matured with quite a different opinion of herself, and likely had different results from her efforts. What is ADHD? Technically, ADHD is a series of symptoms that can be identified by a medical professional with training in ADHD evaluation through specific tests and the compilation of a medical history. The heritability of the condition, along with recent magnetic resonance imaging, known by the acronym MRI, research studies, suggest that there is a biological underpinning for ADHD in the brain. Dr. John Rady, an expert on how the brain functions, suggests that ADHD is the result of dysregulation of the reward system, primarily dopamine, in the brain. In short, the brain of a person with ADHD does not move dopamine and other chemicals in the attention areas of the brain in the same way that the brain of someone without ADHD does. This chemical difference results in the symptoms associated with ADHD. Social pressures at home, at work, and at school often exacerbate a person's response to ADHD and can create additional conditions such as anxiety or depression. The diagnostic criteria for ADHD
Sample complete. Ready to continue?